Cities Skylines 2 just announced some big news and also released a game patch, and unfortunately, I feel, at least in my experience, that maybe this one didn't quite go to plan. In this video, we're going to talk about today's patch as well as that big news that I alluded to before, and we're not going to muck about, we're just going to jump straight into it. To start with, the big thing that they announced today was that the patch removed the entitlement of the beach properties assets. So now they are part of the base game and available to everyone. Saves and custom maps using the assets should work without any extra steps, they say, but as always, don't hesitate to report it as a bug. Additionally, we'll also talk a little bit later in the video about some improvements to performance and a variety of changes, mostly fixes to the game. But firstly, just to finish off on the beach properties part, yep, they're free, they're included in the game. Is your experience like mine if you had it before and then were refunded? I've just been left with a whole load of cubes that change randomly. Trees, buildings, all of the stuff that was included looks rather unusual. Anyway, there were two other things that they announced. One of them maybe quite exciting, the other one a little bit disappointing. Let's start with the good news because we'll save the bad till last. I don't think that's quite how it's supposed to work. Anyhow, with the patch released, next patch is now on their horizon. In fact, they're working on it already, and we should expect to see it in around a month. It will include bug fixes and improvements, but crucially, they say it will, quote, include a large rework of the economy to address much of the feedback you've shared with us in the past few months, end quote. We don't know any more details than that, and they're not going to share them until the patch is ready. The second thing that they announced was around modding. An important part of any Colossal Order game, they say, and one of their top priorities right now is to resolve the remaining issues with the asset import pipeline, so you can actually start to import and share your custom assets on Paradox mods. They say it's proving more difficult than they'd hoped, and don't have an exact timeline, but it will likely take several more months. And that concludes the sort of breaking news roundup for the first part of their release today. The second part, of course, is the patch notes. And to reflect on that first bit just quickly, beach properties are now free for everybody. If you bought them, you'll get refunded, unless you had the Ultimate Edition, as we discussed last week, in which case you'll be supplemented by some radio stations. But in seriousness, though, also you'll get 3 creative packs, and that should provide a good supplement, of course, remembering that the beach property stuff is free. Hopefully yours doesn't look like what mine looked like earlier in the video, and we're not all just staring at big cubes. I'm sure, obviously, that's a mistake, and it will eventually be rectified. Now, let's move through and talk about today's patch update. And spoiler alert, unlike a lot of the other patch updates that we've seen, particularly recently, this one doesn't focus so much on balance. Balance not really a concern, like it was earlier on. Instead, the headlining thing in today's one is performance, which might be a great sigh of relief to a lot of people. In my experience playing on a city of 170,000-ish people, the city you're looking at right now, I didn't see any hugely notable difference. However, it does tend to impact different systems in quite sort of varied ways, maybe on the lower end. However, let's take a look. First up, in performance, NVIDIA DLSS Super Resolution support was added. Not quite sure if that will help on the lower end, but 3 more changes. Firstly, some pathfinding optimizations to reduce the slowing of the simulation. Secondly, some UI optimizations. And finally, more optimizations to reduce frame spikes. Honestly, all good sounding stuff. Did I see a lot of it? Not especially, not particularly. But a concrete conclusion would require more testing than what I can deliver. Next up, we have bug fixes and improvements. It's one of many categories that we've seen in previous patch updates that are overwhelmingly long and maybe not so likely to necessarily land a win with you. The first one is mod options are sorted alphabetically instead of random. That makes sense. Great. They've made the bus stop and mailbox color in the info view the same as the icon. Citizens are more likely to use taxis from outside connections when moving into the city, and automatically pause and display any pending legal documents when continuing last game from the launcher. And once we start going through from there, it probably becomes a little bit tedious, right? I don't need to read out every single one to you. Some crashes were fixed. That could be a relief, maybe. Loads of fixes for the controller as well, if for whatever reason you're playing with a controller. And to be frank with you, the rest of the patch notes read mostly the same way. The next section is for the editor, and again, loads of things have changed. In particular, they've added a lot of things. Notification about mod loading status, support for text input, there's missed attributes to I mean, at this point, I'm probably just saying words, so we'll move swiftly along. Of course, you've had them all up on your screen, and as always, I will link the full patch notes below if there's a specific little thing that you're after. The final part of this release was Paradox Mods. Paradox Mods sees a host of new features, general improvements, and bug fixes. The new features headline with the addition of creator profiles and your profile view. Ability to follow creators. Pressing escape can now be used to close the mods UI. Addition of coffee. Buy me a coffee. Ko-fi. Crowd in as external links so you can fund people who are creating things. Page up, page down, home and end can be used to scroll in various views, and a variety of other changes that you've seen on your screen. General improvements include things like increased scroll speed, reordered icons when browsing mods, and the thumbnail for them is now visible on mod details. Various UI changes, perhaps quality of life changes, that should make Paradox Mods a little bit better, because of course, as we know, it's in beta, and from what I've read, I don't personally actually have that many issues with it. My game's crashed once or twice, perhaps using mods, but by and large, it has worked for me. But I know from reading the comments on last week's video and on a video from a couple of weeks before that, that loads of you do have those problems. Because it's very much, as I say, a beta tool. So it's nice to see new features. It's nice to see improvements and bug fixes. As we've discussed before, it's got a long way to go. From the top of my head, I feel like October was the target to have it completely done. But as we talked about at the start of the video, they've got some problems in the pipeline that are taking many months to fix. And that brings us to the end of today's update. Kind of a double whammy, almost. The first part about the future of CS2, some updates, changing economy, for example, and then the second part looking at today's patch, which overall, not an especially exciting patch update. However, vital stuff, most likely, nonetheless. So it's great to see. And naturally, that brings us to the end of the video. A fairly quick one this week because, as I say, there wasn't really much of substance to discuss outside of those first few updates and maybe the headlining few bullet points within each section of the patch notes. Is this a good step in Cities Skylines' new way forward? Well, probably. I mean, we need patches like this. We need the fundamental ones that fix the issues, as well as the features, the new features, the rollouts. And of course the bones, the brittle bones around things like performance. And I hope that the headline issues in today's patch do provide some performance relief to a whole load of you out there, like these poor people stuck in traffic in my city. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.